Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast.
Hey there, Karma Crew. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Mind Your Own Karma, the Adoption Chronicles. Today I have Jean Widner on the show. Jean was born in 1965 in Spokane, Washington, at a Salvation Army hospital. Her birth mother came from North Dakota. Jean had a mostly good adoptee experience. Her parents were really wonderful and good people. Her dad was an educator and her mother a nurse. But that was not to say that there weren't some challenges growing up. Jean's mother was addicted to prescription drugs and alcohol by the time Jean came into their lives. Today, Jean is a professional writer and a business owner of a small-town media outlet, BoulderCity.com. She has worked retail and co-owned 2 successful e-commerce companies and now works as an online marketing consultant. When not working, she, her husband, and 2 golden retrievers are traveling the western U.S. Jean is currently working on a groundbreaking book called The Adoption Paradox. Here is my interview with Jean Widner. We are welcoming Jean to the show today. Hi, Jean.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad you're here. I just kind of want to start and ask you, why do you want to tell your adoption story?
I think that there's healing always in one person sharing what their learned wisdom is over their life and sharing it with others. I know when I listen to somebody's story, there's always that one little nugget that you take away and you pop it in your back pocket. And that's always hopefully a value, right?
Yeah, definitely. So what do you know about your adoption story? Why were you put up for adoption?
I know some, not everything.
Uh-huh.
What I do have is the letter from the Salvation Army. I was born in 1965 in Spokane, Washington, a pretty much a quintessential baby scoop era story. What I know from the Salvation Army is that she was from North Dakota. According to their records, she had dated my father for about 2 years. They had a little bit of issue in their relationship in that apparently she was a serious Catholic and he was a serious Methodist. He was a little bit older than her and he was stationed in a nearby air base. He was in the Air Force. And they dated, then they broke up, then they got back together. And at some point in the summer of 1964, when she graduated from college, she got pregnant, so August of 64 is when she would have gotten pregnant with me. At some point, I know he gets shipped off to Alaska. And he wouldn't marry her because of the religious differences.
Oh, wow.
And also because he couldn't figure out how to support her. We know they didn't pay those young men anything, back then. And the other troubling issue for her is not only, she was the youngest by far of 3 other siblings who were all up and out and married in college or whatever. So it was just her and her mother and her stepfather, who, interestingly enough, was the chief of police in their very, very small town. And he was also abusive to her mother. So he was smacking them around. And, in 1965, nothing's going to happen to him, and most especially because he's the chief of police.
Yes.
So they're trapped. They're stuck. And, of course, my mother is pregnant. And, they knew they had to get her out of there before she was showing, for sure. So I know that on her mother's side, she had a great aunt who lived in Spokane, Washington. And so there was the Salvation Army, Booth Hospital there for unwed mothers. And so that's probably where that connection came from North Dakota all the way to Washington State. It's the only thread that there is to pull there that makes any sense. So she went there. The letter that the Salvation Army sent to me had a couple of just really heartbreaking points. Other than that, she had gotten an apartment apparently on her own rather than staying with that extended family. And apparently her mother was sending her a little bit of money for, food and rent.
Mhm.
And her boyfriend was sending her a little bit of money to help with the medical expenses. And she does the intake initially with the Salvation Army in January. In February, she goes back for one of her prenatal checkups, and she's showing to be highly anemic and a bit malnourished. And so they start to query her on why that is. And she admits that she's living on cereal,
Oh, wow.
that she doesn't have enough money even for food.
Mm.
And so they explain to her that, she doesn't need to struggle, that they have fully in-home care. And at that point is when she moves into the center. And so it's just like, I do want to come back to this, but one of my great character flaws in life is I have no ability to ask for help. I am stubborn, I'm willful, I'm gritty. And it's always funny to me because that is not a character trait of my adopting parents who raised me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wondered where it came from.
Are you an Aries by any chance?
No, I'm a Taurus. But that's funny. But I'm a first day Taurus. So 12 hours earlier, I would have been an Aries. So, I remember seeing that on the page. And of course, it's like, obviously it's so hard to read, but it's like, oh my God, she's trying so hard, right?
Yeah.
She's just trying to make it through this.
Yeah.
And, anyway, the letter continues and, she adapted well to group home living, blah, blah, blah. And, I'm born on April 21st, and she relinquishes me on April 30th and gets on a train that very night and goes back to North Dakota.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. So they gave you all that paperwork? That was all in what the Salvation Army gave you, or how did you get
that's
that?
a 2-page letter.
Oh, wow. All
of the
that was in 2
non-identifying
pages.
information. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's it. That's all you get. What state were you born in again?
Washington.
Washington. Is that still closed?
It is mostly open. It was open enough for me to get my original birth certificate.
So you know your parents' names?
I know my mother's name.
Okay. There was no father listed on there.
There's no father listed, and I am also unnamed.
Mm.
Every once in a while that crawls into the little back of my brain.
Yeah. I wonder if she just didn't want to connect like that,
It's so random because in the reading and the research that I've done, it just kind of comes down to the advice they were getting from that particular social worker. It seems like, some of them would advise them not to name the baby because you could become more attached to it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And so,
yeah, that's going to help.
Yeah.
That's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Right.
Really? Okay, sure. Let's go with that.
Right. So you went to your adopted parents. How old were you when they adopted you?
Just 2 months old.
Okay. And do you know why they wanted to adopt?
Yeah, my daddy was sterile. He was born in 1931 and had very nearly died of mumps when he was 4 years old, and sustained a really, really high fever, and that kills the swimmers.
Yeah.
So, they knew. And I'm completely certain that he disclosed that to my mother when they were courting, that he's probably not going to be able to, but they got married in 1962, and he was a school psychologist. And so he finished his PhD down in New Mexico and then got a job as a school psychologist up in Yakima, Washington. That was a big deal. It's like in the newspaper and everything.
Oh, wow.
Flipping, that they have a PhD coming into the area for a school psychologist. And, in the 60s, when you got married, you had kids.
Yeah.
Whether you thought about it or not, that's what you did. That's what society's expectation was.
Right. So were you an only child, or did they adopt others, or you were the only child?
I'm an only child.
Only child. And so when did you find out you were adopted? Do you remember being
I'm
told?
that grew up knowing.
You grew up knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. So growing up, how was that? Did you think about that at all, that you were adopted? Did you go to the store and look around and see if anyone looked like you, or did you just not, did it not cross your mind?
You know, whatever stories they did tell me, however that, was framed, I would say they did a good job in that they framed that very positively for me. They always only referred to my mother who gave me up as just being, you know, they didn't know why, they didn't know exactly what her circumstances were, but they were certain that she loved me, and always really reinforced that. And then reinforced to me that, I mean, yes, you're special, you're wanted, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
uh, they never used the word chosen. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I grew up proud of being adopted. I mean, when I was 4, if I were introduced to an adult, I just might toddle up to you and just say, I'm adopted.
Really?
Yeah, I was very proud. I was adopted.
Uh,
I knew what the word meant though, and I knew that it applied to me.
yeah.
And people would kind of be a little bit taken aback because you just didn't always blurt things like that out.
Right.
I didn't care.
Yeah. And your parents didn't care that you did that? Like they
My
didn't have a,
dad just kind of went, yeah, she is. We're happy. We love her to death. She's great. Everything's great.
yeah.
So
So you mentioned some things that when you were growing up, your mom was struggling with drugs and alcohol.
yeah,
Did you recognize that as a child that something was going on, or?
yeah, that's the tough relationship. My mother, and I mean, we know enough to know, I think, you're a learned person, I'm a learned person. We've looked at and studied this stuff, and that's why we're talking about it. I mean, she was raised by, wow, a mean-spirited alcoholic.
Mm,
So I mean, she came by her troubles righteously earned.
yeah.
So I mean, when she got out of her own house, she crawled inside a bottle of pills. She was a registered nurse.
Mm,
This was still, you got to remember, the late 60s and the early 70s. This is before computers. This is before the medical community even woke up to the fact that they could have an issue. I mean, she was a pro. By the time I came along, she had 7 different doctors prescribing her medications.
oh, wow. Wow.
And so the way that that manifested itself in my house was I had 2 mommies.
Mm,
One was normal, happy mommy. Everything was fine. We were a perfect family on paper. We were a perfect family to anyone else's eyes. Um, but the other mommy was crying, screaming, depressed, and I didn't know what mommy. And, I definitely felt, rejected by her because of that. There were just things that she was just not available for me. I didn't have a mommy. I
yeah.
didn't have that maternal safe harbor.
Right.
And I know a lot of people didn't have that. And, be they natural or be they adopted.
Mhm.
Um, I honestly believe that had I been her natural child, I think the results would have been the same, because by definition, when you're an addict, you're not available to be bonded to.
Right. Yeah.
You're in your addiction.
Yeah.
And so, that was hard. Um, when I was 13, she started her journey to be clean and sober.
Mm,
Um, so she did pull herself up and out eventually, but
wow.
the damage had been done.
Mm,
As
yeah.
an only child, I mean, I would come home, change out of my, school clothes and into my play clothes, and I was
Be gone.
gone.
Yeah. So
So,
how's the relationship now?
um, she's gone. I mean, she
Mm,
she she left this earth in 2017, and that was
mm,
hard. I mean, she had Parkinson's near the end with dementia, and it was rough.
yeah.
Um, but I took care of her. I mean, I made sure that she had the care that she needed. Um, we did our best to heal over all of those years. We did our
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
We truly tried to show up for each other as much as we could. And I know she loved me.
Yeah. So
So,
how is it with your dad? Is he still around or?
you know, he left us earlier. So, dad will, even with the obvious flaws that he was not paying attention to the fact he had a pharmacy in his own bathroom,
Yeah.
um, and an extremely high maintenance wife.
Mm-hmm.
um, I always remained close to him. I always remained very, very bonded to him. He was my champion and I was his,
Mm.
So I mean, you know, they they accidentally got a lot right about adoption. Um, they always advocated for me. They always had my back. Um, they were my parents, period, you know? And so, and I was never afraid to talk about, I wonder, I wonder what my mother looks like. I wonder if she liked ballet like I did, I wonder if she liked to swim like I do. Um, it was it it was never taboo ever once.
Oh,
And like
great.
the few times that I, did the whole I'm going to go off and find my real mom, bit
Yeah.
in the teen years. My dad responded to that by saying, "Awesome. I hope you find her. If you do, I'd like to thank her." you
That's
know,
great.
which I've shared with a couple of other birth mothers, that I've talked to, and they all laugh and just, have the same, because I mean, what can you say to that other than, okay, these are two people who are not intimidated by this.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So looking back on your childhood, maybe even as your teens or, early 20s, looking back, do you see adoption shaping you in any way?
Oh yeah, it's there. I mean, the rejection and the pain, the insecurity, for sure. I mean, in my teen years, I did struggle, most definitely. And some of that, unpacking the difference between the way that being in a home with addiction and being adopted, it's hard to really separate that out
Yeah.
because the symptoms and the outcomes are basically very, very similar.
Yeah.
Um, but like the high functioning anxiety, uh, I am the quintessential good adoptee without any question.
Yeah.
The achiever, the need to be perfect, the need to always just make sure everything was okay. And yeah, some of that is trying to also cope and not set off my mom, right? But some of that is just also kind of underlying in ways that really do feel like adoption stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that's kind of hard because my story is kind of the same way as, how much of it's adoption, how much of it is, not really knowing who I was growing up and having low self-esteem. And like you said, being the perfect child and the pleaser and just doing the things that you thought you should do and not what you really wanted to do, or even consulting yourself on who you really were and what you wanted to do. It's all kind of in one big ball.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't even know. It's like when I
You can't
started to
blame it all on adoption. It's just.
no, I mean, some of this is human stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember it's like when I started, my healing journey, one of the hardest things for me, it's like somebody would say, "How are you feeling?" And I would be like, "I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to put words, or even it isn't even that I don't even know how to put words. It's like,
I
what
just don't know.
is
I
this
really.
feeling, you know?"
Yeah. Yeah, it is a weird feeling to have no feeling really, or just not know, like you said, not know how to label the feeling that you're having.
Yeah.
So did you search for your biological family? What happened with that?
I never did until 2020.
Mm.
Um, in 2012, when, some of the first ancestry DNA tests, started to become available. My husband and his mom, all three of us did it together. We did it in part because his mom, she knows she knows she doesn't know who her father is. Her mother was morally relaxed and an alcoholic herself. And so she knows that she doesn't know who her father is. So we all did it thinking, kind of on a lark, just like, oh, won't this be fun? And I didn't have any close matches at all. Until 2020, I finally had my first or second cousin match.
Oh, wow.
And, it was that Thanksgiving, right? Remember, and the whole world is shut down. And so the three of us are together, and, I was talking to my husband about all of this, and he says, babe, nobody in this scenario is getting any younger. If you want to find her, you better get after it.
Yeah.
She's probably in her 70s by now. So,
right.
Yeah.
And so what happened? Did you search?
Yeah. So, I'd reached out to one of my, it was actually one of the first cousins that popped up, was already deceased, unfortunately. But there was a second cousin that had a insanely big tree and who lived in Tel Aviv, Israel, of all places.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm sending out these very tentative, emails that you first do when you start this process. I don't want to upset anybody. I'm adopted, blah, blah, blah. And Shoshana is her name. And my I guess she's actually my third cousin on my on my mother's side. She was so funny because she's a much, much older woman. And she just says, oh, for the love of God, stop apologizing. Everybody has a right to know who their mother is,
Wow, nice.
She went straight in, all
nice.
in, trying to, figure out, the connection. And so we were looking at a lot of stuff. But in the meantime, I called the Salvation Army, group, that runs the Booth Memorial Hospitals, because I knew they did offer some search and reunion services. And so I was asking her about that. And then she says to me on the phone, well, you're from Washington State. Did you know that you can get your original birth certificate? Which I did not. I did not know that. So I wrote and sent in my $25, and within a few months actually got it.
Wow.
And so that's how I'll never forget this sequence. It was on a Friday night in early April in 2021 at this point. And, I've seen other adoptees, say something similar. Here's just this white, plain, normal sized envelope, no tracking. It's not flat the way that you would expect official documents to be delivered.
Yeah.
It just comes to the house. And we had two houses at that point, one in California and one in Nevada. And it goes to the California house where my husband is, and I'm in Nevada. And he's like, he calls me and he says, okay, I've got a letter here from the state of Washington. And I'm like, it's just a letter? And he says, yes. And so I immediately went, dumb. You didn't check a box right, or you didn't do something right. They've sent it back to you, and now you've delayed the process. And he opens it up and he's like, nope, it's a birth certificate.
Oh, wow.
And takes a picture of it and sends it to me, So yeah, it is sort of like, thanks for the respect, Washington.
Right.
Love ya.
Wow.
And so that was Friday, about 7:30 at night. Saturday morning, I call my mother-in-law, who's much better at ancestry search and all their stupid tools. Their search function sucks. And she's way better at navigating it than I am. And I said, okay, here's what we have. She's from North Dakota, and this is her name. This is the town, and I need to give this to you, right? Because you're better at it than me, and I'm too emotional right now.
Yeah.
And that's at 8:30 in the morning. At 11:30, my mother-in-law calls me and she says, I'm going to send you something. She's like, sit down,
Oh boy.
go over to your computer. And there comes her high school photo, her high school senior photo. I mean, there's just no question.
Wow.
And so the town that she was born in is where she stayed and was raised in. And so we take all of that and we send this back to Shoshana in Israel on Sunday. I'm like, oh my God, here she is, and here's a picture of me at about the same age at that. It's like, oh my God,
Really? Wow.
it's like looking in a mirror. And so I sent that to Israel, the Israel contingent, who works while we sleep, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I woke up Monday morning and there, sure enough, there's an email from Shoshana and she says, she's rattling on about some other thing and then says, oh, by the way, I found your mother, and hands me her wedding certificate, her current residence, a picture on Google Earth of her current residence. She's alive, living in a Denver suburb.
Oh my
There you go.
gosh.
And so there that was. And then that Monday night, my house caught on fire. So that was a lot of fun.
Oh my
So
What the hell?
I went, I admit, I sat up and I drank some alcohol that night. I had the TV on and I don't remember that I was watching it really.
Right.
I was sort of sitting there with a bottle of wine,
Yeah.
and went to bed at about 11:30 and no crap, 12:15 off goes the smoke alarm. Fortunately the house was ultimately okay, but it is just it's like, what a sequence.
Right. Oh
uh,
my God.
so yeah, so that's how I found my mom. I then went back to the Salvation Army and I said, do you want to try to neutrally reach out first? And just because I really always have been in this maybe very misguided, I've now learned, sort of train of thought that I want to respect her. I want to respect privacy.
Mm-hmm.
I've always, I've never held any ill will for her. I've always if she went on to have 47 children, God bless her, I hope she's had a good life. I hope she's happy. I hope that she has found her way. And, never felt like I had the right to barge through her front door, if you will. So I thought, okay, the Salvation Army is neutral. This is what they do. And so I let them make 2 attempts at contact. There was no response. So at that point, I closed the case with them and I composed my own letter and sent it along with a few photos. Just giving her all my love, just to say, I'm okay. I don't know what you went through, but I know it was hard and I've never resented you. I've always loved you. And if you want to talk, I'm open to that, and sent that. It contained my whole heart. And I just used FedEx tracking on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I know it was delivered.
Yeah.
But there's been no outreach,
no
return.
Wow.
And so it's hard to know.
Yeah. Do you know if you had any siblings or anything like that, or
no evidence of that? And it's weird because there's a couple of names related to her husband's name, but she doesn't marry until 1985. She's 39 when she marries.
Mm-hmm.
So she has me in 1965 and she falls off the face of the earth. Although there is one other tragedy that is just really sad. Remember her mother back in North Dakota with the abusive husband, right? So she relinquishes me in April of 1965. And in November of 1967, just a little over 2 years later, her mother dies.
Oh, wow.
And by the
Yeah.
way, 3 years later, the bastard remarries somebody else.
Mm.
Mhm. Anyway, so again, it's a big ask for me to have of her, to ask her to go back into probably many, many, many layers of pain. I mean, she has the unacknowledged pain of giving me up. And then I don't care what her relationship was like with her mother, that has to be a hard loss compounding on that. So close.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, she doesn't marry until 1965. And like I said, there's no evidence of she and her husband having any children,
Wow.
not together. And she would have been
Yeah.
39, which,
Yeah. 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 So, went through your DNA, you haven't gotten any leads on the paternal side.
I worked with a search angel for a while. She sadly, uh, she sadly died of cancer a couple of years ago.
Mm.
But I mean, she did a lot of looking, and I mean, that paternal side is a spaghetti bowl. It is a mess. There is as she said to me, there is at least one other, either adoption, infidelity, whole series of them in there.
Oh.
There's It's very frustrating because the closest CM match, I do have a CM match in 23andMe of like 1158, which is a really high number.
Mm-hmm.
That's like I'm his aunt or he's my uncle or something like that.
Yeah.
That man will not respond. You must send
Ah.
him 47 emails, worded in 100 different ways, and there's been nothing. There might be one man, one family that does check a lot of boxes. If it is him, he died in 2018.
Mm.
So I'm dealing with only his widow and his only son. And again, I've reached out on Facebook, but he's not very active, and so I've not heard anything back. But that one is creepy because there's a definite family resemblance. And I mean, like, especially across the eyes, like his kids looked like me when I was 5.
Oh, wow.
So for
And so
him,
you reached out through Facebook to his son and haven't heard anything.
nothing. So I mean, unless I just start showing up places and beating down doors, I don't know,
Yeah. Well, you never
something.
know when you're going to get that phone call or that letter back.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you don't know.
You
That's
have to
so
stay hopeful.
frustrating.
Yeah. You have to stay hopeful.
Yeah.
Um, you know, every Christmas, right? There's all of those DNA gifts that get given. And so
Yeah.
every
True.
every spring I hope for an email,
Yeah.
who the heck are
Yeah.
you?
Even though I know my, biology and stuff, when I did ancestry, I didn't really get any close hits. And it just kind of it's like almost how you already feel like the stork just dropped you off. You weren't really born. It just kind of confirms that for me. It's like, why can't I get a close match? I think all I have are second and third cousins, maybe, but like I said, I know my biological parents and my siblings and stuff, but it's just nice to see that, in writing or actual science that yes, I do belong somewhere. You know what I mean? I came from
Mhm.
somewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, that's when we, as adoptees, talk about these new awakenings and the whole, the phraseology around coming out of the fog or what have you, which I kind of have a love-hate relationship with that term even, but when you awaken yourself, once you do, that's it. You took the red pill or the blue pill or whatever the hell pill, you know? Um,
Yes.
that's it. You are now awake.
Yes. So what triggered that for you?
I mean, for sure, just the willingness to start down the journey.
Mhm.
But then, um, I've always been a writer, and so there's the decision to write a book, so that's there. But then, for sure, reading The Girls That Went Away.
Mm,
The Girls Who Went Away is quintessential to that era, that my
yeah.
mother came from. And
Mhm.
so it it reinforced what I thought I knew, but then took me so much further along those pathways and those intimacies and the pain of what that all would have been like. And it's kind of one of those things where I think we know as women coming of age in a much different era that, oh, things were different.
Yeah.
Like we know intellectually that, but that book in particular really does. I mean, that's it. You are filleted, you are open,
Yeah.
you see,
When
and
did
then
you read that book?
sometime in 2021. I don't remember
Okay.
exactly when, but yeah.
Hmm. So do you think reading that kind of, well, it sounded like you had compassion for your birth mother all along, though.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
understood.
yeah, because I know I read a birth mother book that Catherine Fogley wrote, and that really opened me up, um, and really opened up the compassion for my birth mother. And that's why I think it's so important to hear all sides of the story, which kind of brings us to your book. You want to talk about that a little bit? It's pretty interesting what you're doing.
Thanks. Yes. I'm working on a book called The Adoption Paradox. And my goal is to combine research and storytelling and on all three sides. One section of the book is all adoptee focus. Then the next section of the book is all the birth parent focus. The third section of the book is all the adopting parent focus. I'm including foster care in that camp too. And then, the other section of the book is based on reunion,
Mm.
what we know, what we don't know, what we learn, how we stub our toe, how we maybe try to make it better,
Yeah.
to help people prepare for reunion so that maybe some of those reunions can be more successful,
Hmm.
um, or at least less painful.
Yeah.
Uh, and then, yeah, we're talking about the laws, all these stupid laws that were written between 1920 and 1940 that are
Yeah.
back assward in a modern era. They never envisioned consumer level DNA. They never envisioned all of the things that our society is now, but it needs to catch up
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I'm really trying to take a very thoughtful and very comprehensive and circumspect look and let each side have their say, because I think it's so important.
Yeah. I do too. So, in hearing all these stories, how has that affected you?
It's
How many
humbling.
stories have you heard?
Um, I'm over 50 to 60,
Mm,
and continuing on.
mhm.
I mean, it's humbling. It honors me so much that people are willing to trust me to be that intimate.
Yeah.
It's sometimes I mean, and I'm not a super religious person, but it is almost biblical. I mean, it's like a person's testimony. It's like you're bearing witness to
Yeah.
someone's life.
Hmm.
And then I take that recording and I take that written word and then edit it down and then match it against the research. And, again, we weave all of these very intricate patterns together about, generations, sometimes generations of good, sometimes generations of trauma, sometimes there can be so much love and so much pain all at once. And that's why I call it a paradox.
Hmm. So, in listening to the stories, and how is that? What are you wanting to get through the book by doing that, by telling all these different stories? What are you wanting to get across?
a much broader understanding of adoption for not only everyone in the constellation, but even for those outside of it. Here's the thing. For us to make adoption better, there are some things that need to happen. There's an education of adopting parents. There's an education that is needed for people in the system. There's education that is needed for lawmakers. And there's education needed for the general public, because, I mean, we're a mighty little force, but we're not enough.
Yeah.
We are not going to be able to bring about the changes that are needed in our society without people who are outside of the constellation also aware.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that when you simply present information that is factually backed and then present stories, people will listen. And, I mean, everyone around me, like all of my friends, oh my God, my husband, I mean, he now has to listen to adoption, but I mean, my Rotary group, or other people that are just in my sphere on an extended basis. It's like when you start talking about, well, actually, no, this isn't the way adoption is functioning now. It's functioning more like this instead of like this other thing that is what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you inform them of that, they're hacked off too.
Yeah.
They come to understand, it's like, well, wait a minute. Why is the word coercion and birth mother even in the same sentence?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean there's people profiting?
Yeah.
What do you mean that most international adoptions have been shut down because of concerns over trafficking? What do you mean we're almost the only country that's still doing this? And when you inform them of that, they're like, yeah, you're right. This is dumb. And yeah, you should have access to your birth certificate and you should know your medical information. And so
all the little things everyone else takes for granted. It's, they
yeah,
don't think about all those things.
yeah. But when you, for the most part, in my experience, I haven't had one person that I've talked to who's just shut me down.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm reaching out to, religious leaders in my local community, and I'm saying, hey, guys, we need your help too. We need your help for family preservation.
Yeah.
We need your help to minimize unnecessary adoptions. This whole win-win-win fairy tale is just that.
Yeah.
And the ones who are really interested in doing good in the world and walking their talk, again, they want to become informed and then they want to mobilize to help.
Do you find any adoptees? Because I know if I do a podcast with a birth mother or an adoptive parent, there's adoptees that won't even push play as soon as they see that. Are you getting any backlash from having all these different sections in the book?
I have gotten some, I mean, and I'm having to get brave, because I don't get brave easy. I'm, remember, I'm a good adoptee. I want everyone to like me.
I know.
It's very scary. I'm very scared. So, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna have to toughen up. I have to, because now I can't go back. Yeah. I'm telling the flipping world. You can't chicken out now. So, I mean, yeah, it's like, once again, it's the only way to make it better.
I believe that too. I really do. And, once like you were saying, once you hear one adoptee story, you're like, okay, that was their story, then you hear another one and you're like, oh, and then you hear another one, you're like, wait a minute. When you start hearing more and more of kind of the same, the same line, different, kind of a little different story, then you start getting people going, oh, this is really a thing, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't really go out and pick and choose often looking for people to be on the podcast. I'll throw a line out and see who comes, and whoever comes, their story comes on here, and I'm not picking and choosing just the bad ones or just the good ones or whatever. I'm just picking whoever's coming along, and this is the truth about what really happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing that I will say is, excuse me, I mean, there are some horrendous stories out there. There is a lot of anger out there. For an adoptee who was abused or misused, my God.
Yeah.
I mean, I've taken in some of those and they're horrendous to hear. It takes me days to recover sometimes, much less what they have gone through in their lives. And so, how sadistic is that to adopt a child and then maltreat them for
Yeah.
God's sake? That is,
Mhm.
it's evil. It's
Yeah.
evil. Let's call it what it is. I also think that we can learn from the commonalities of good stories. Let's look at those commonalities. Let's
Yeah.
talk to therapists, the adoption competent therapists that are, emerging all the time right now, who are really invested in trying to do this better.
Mhm.
Let's talk to the agencies who are not profiting, who are trying to do good work. And one of the things too that I always insist is a part of my tent is foster care.
Yeah.
I mean, I just recently interviewed a couple who live in my small town locally. They've taken in 2 sets of baby twins who are severely fetal alcohol syndrome drug addicted
Mm.
babies. Those kids are now 13 and 17 respectively. I mean, that family and what they have had to do together to get these young people to the point that they are. And I know they're teenagers. I know the good adoptee scenario. There's no doubt that these kids are not traumatized, and their prefrontal cortex doesn't work the way other people's does.
Yeah.
And it's never going to, because some of this damage is so permanent. But I don't see a lot of people lining up to go through the level of parenting that those kids have needed.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're saviors. I'm not
No.
buying into that language, and they're not buying into it either.
Yeah.
They just decided to do the job.
Right. I think too, kind of just backtracking a little bit. I think I told you when we talked before that I have a episode about foster care, and that's like my lowest viewed episode out of over 100. And I really feel like people don't want to hear the truth. Sometimes they just want to stay ignorant because once you're not ignorant anymore and your fog's lifted, like you said, once the fog's lifted, what are you going to do now? And I think some people just want to stay in the adoption fairy tale fog or the foster care fog, and oh, it's a great thing, and they don't want to know the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed some staggering stories of what, everyone will say, well, no child should be in danger with their biological parent. I just interviewed a kid who aged out of the foster care system, whose bio parent didn't even put him in school. I mean,
Mm.
he literally wandered the internal ghetto of some of Las Vegas's worst quadrant with no shoes. He carried
Mm.
around a water bottle in the summer to try to keep his feet cool,
Oh my gosh.
and eventually ended up in the system because eventually a police officer saw him on a school day and is like, why is this kid not in school? But he was so malnourished. He was significantly underweight and significantly undersized his whole life. Still is.
Yeah.
He's 24 years old,
Yeah.
and then sexually abused in
Mm.
2 of his first placements by other kids.
Oh wow.
So yeah, that's a story I have.
Yeah.
It's in my head now forever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a good, decent young man who's holding down a job, He's making his way as best he can as a good citizen. But
Yeah.
that's where he came from. And so you want to say that no kid should be in danger? I agree.
Yep.
Let's look at what that looks like.
Right. Yeah. We need to. I just, like I said, I think some people don't want to because then they're going to be held accountable and they're not ready to do that. And it's painful to watch and listen to.
It
It
is.
is, but it's the truth,
It
you know.
is. And so I don't profess to know what the answers are, but I do want to tell the stories so that people have to ask themselves to try to find the answers. And
Yeah.
again, the only way we do that is together.
Right. Yeah. So, what personally has helped you with dealing with adoption trauma? What have you done to help heal yourself?
Yeah, I got some healing early in my 20s. I was definitely off track in my 20s. And I reached out ironically to my mother, and she gave me the hand up through Adult Children of Alcoholics, which is a companion 12-step program to, what she had done through AA to get herself clean and sober. That saved my life. It literally did put me back onto a path that I guess I was probably meant to be on, because if any, I mean, 12-step is a spiritual program as much as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the thing about it is it forces you to take agency. It forces you to take responsibility. It forces you into saying, okay, this terrible, awful, crappy thing is your past. You're the only one who decides your destiny.
Yep.
And so you take your life and reframe it. And it forces you to take responsibility for that. We cannot heal what we will not, we have to feel, right?
Yeah.
We cannot heal what we will not feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's next?
Yeah.
And so that gave me a lot of tools, that again kind of got tucked into my back pocket. They're my toolkit for life. And so by the time I'm, hitting that 2020, 2021 window, I have all this
Mm-hmm.
to me. The other thing for me is I started meditating in 2008, 2007, something like that. And that was also a part of my mother's journey. And, when you learn to understand that your thoughts and your feelings are temporary, that you can just let a thought or a feeling sort of drift by you and through you and not necessarily have to do anything about it.
Yeah.
That you can give yourself enough space where you learn how to respond rather than just react.
Yeah.
And so knowing how to breathe, knowing how to center yourself, knowing how to move from that dinosaur brain, that sympathetic part of our brain, the sympathetic part of our nervous system, which is, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? Attack, keyboard warrior, keyboard warrior.
Yep.
Who's typing?
Right. Right.
Who's typing? The dinosaur brain is typing.
Yes, it is.
And
I
so
just see a T-Rex on the keyboard.
right, exactly. And so it's like, nope, take a breath, go for a walk, give yourself some space, allow yourself to calm down, and then try to respond. Am I perfect at that? No, but at least I have the awareness to try.
Yeah. My new saying is triggers are your treasures. And if you, kind of ask yourself, why is this triggering me? And try and figure that out, that's huge before you start reacting.
Absolutely. And like on that one episode that you did a little while ago, where you were talking about, can we all just get along?
Mm-hmm.
I have a different phrase to say something along what you said, which is that when you point your finger at someone else, there's 3 fingers pointed back at you.
Yep.
But it is true. I mean, it's like Dr. Dean Ornish, who's one of the teachers that I've enjoyed so much, is he says, the people who aggravate you the most are your spiritual teachers, maybe in another form.
Yep. Yeah,
Because if
definitely.
someone really is like under your skin and just, you swear to God, they breathe in your hemisphere and you're freaking triggered. Okay, there's something
There's
there.
something
So
there.
take a breath and figure it out, because they're hitting something that's in you,
Yes.
in them,
Yep.
you.
Yes. Seems like such common sense to me now. I mean, back in the day, I was a reactor. I'll admit that. But now it's like as soon as I feel that, I'm just like, okay, why? Why is that, you know, why is that triggering me? And I mean, you learn so much by doing that.
Yeah, no, and I mean, no one's perfect. I
Yeah.
still react.
No,
Everyone still
I do
reacts.
too.
Everyone does, you
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
And we all do need to give each other space to maybe have a less than finer moment. I need that. I
Yeah.
need grace. I need forgiveness.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I just don't understand why we can't give that space to each other and allow us to have our own opinions and, that have been formed from what we've been through. It's such a personal thing. Each story is, we're so much alike, but we're so different too. And to allow everyone to have their opinion. I mean, how is that hurting you? Like,
You know,
you
we're in a
know?
we're in a funny place right now in our culture. And I mean, this is outside of the realm of adoption per se, but maybe in very much the karmic realm. It's like we don't want to take responsibility sometimes for the bad things that our side or our tribe is doing. I think
Hmm.
that's part of a big thing that's dividing our politics right now. Is it's
Yeah.
completely heinous when your guy does this thing, but it's perfectly fine
Yeah.
when mine does it,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
We don't want to take responsibility for ourselves. And we also will take absolute glee in grabbing someone else by the scruff of the neck and rubbing their nose in their poo poo, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, we're mean.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting. It's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's about finding space and grace and protecting yourself, knowing when to just say, I think I need to walk away.
Yep.
Maybe not forever, but I need to walk away for now, you know,
Hmm.
and to try to do that before you've said that awful thing you can't take back.
Yeah.
Uh, some days are better at that than others. But I really just do. I think, and all of that, spills into our community as much as any other part of our culture.
Yeah, definitely. So, in closing, what would you like struggling adoptees to know?
Never give up. Um, Never give up hope. Hope gets you out of bed every morning. Hope is amazing. It is also not a strategy, though. I used to say that to my team. They would be like, well, we hope this is going to happen, or we hope that that's going to happen. It's like, no, hope is not a strategy. Believe.
Mm,
So it's like, never give up, always have hope, and believe. We all have to show up in our own lives. It's been a harder journey for some than others, without
yeah.
a doubt. And it doesn't mean that I don't have all the piles of compassion in the world for those people who have hard stories, who are having to make their way through people who were cruel to them and unkind to them in heinous ways. And you have to move on anyway. You have to. Otherwise, you just drown and it consumes you.
Yeah.
And every single person, I believe, has some gift. And
Hmm.
so if you hang in there long enough, you can find your way out, and you can find peace, and you can find love and forgiveness forgiveness, and even through our pain. Maybe not forgiveness. Some people don't like that word. I'm okay with that. But allowing the pain to no longer consume every part of you is so important, because then you have to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, when you were telling your story today, I always say it's in the shape of someone else's wound. And there's so many correlations that if I was listening to your story, I would be like, me too, me too. I mean, even down to your birth mother's mother passing, because my birth mother's mother passed when she was 6 months pregnant with me. So just all these little things, I would have been like, oh, that's my story. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and telling your story, because I know it's in the shape of somebody else's wound that needs to hear it. So thanks for coming on.
thank you so very much.
I just love what Jean is doing with this book idea and just bringing everyone together and having all these stories in one book. That is the passion that I have for this podcast as well. And those of us that are out there telling our stories and hearing all these stories over and over and over again, it does get so draining to hear all the complexities of adoption from all sides. But for me, this is so important to be able to hold space for all of you to come on here and tell your story, and even holding space for all of you that are listening to these stories. We can't stop now. We have to keep going. And if you are ready to tell your story on the podcast, please get a hold of me. My email is mindyourownkarma@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. You can also get a hold of me and become a part of the Karma Crew on my website, mindyourownkarma.com. As always, take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember to mind your own karma. I'll see you next time.